India, a country of extremes like no other, of a staggering diversity, where ethnicity, culture, religion and language come together in a dazzling kaleidoscope of humanity. In its 7,000-year-old history, India has provided the world with its riches. However, India's invaluable contributions to science and technology have all too often been overlooked. They've become so much a part of our daily life that we've taken them for granted.
India's ancient knowledge remains an untold story. Few know how profoundly India has shaped the modern world. That it was India that came up with the concept that fueled the global high-tech revolution. That it was India that helped nurture the roots of modern medicine. As it turns out, the key to scientific and technological innovations of the present, and it may be of the future, have long lain hidden in the untold story of what the ancient Indians knew. The colourful impressions in the ancient city of Delhi are almost overwhelming for someone coming from the West. Exotic and totally foreign, they reflect a culture that has one foot in the past and the other solidly planted in the future. With poverty on one side, India has one of the fastest growing economies on the other. India is poised to lead the world into the future. Just why is an important part of the untold story of India's scientific and technological contributions. Contributions that have been decisive in shaping the present. To look at one of the most astounding feats of India's past, I travelled to Jaipur, some 300 miles south of Delhi. Jaipur is famous for its legendary Pink Palace, but I was looking for a scientific treasure of magnificent scale. Here in Jaipur, the Hindu belief spurred an innovation of unprecedented precision. Much like in the modern Western world, the movements of the sun, the planets and the stars were believed to affect human life. In order to determine the most auspicious times for important events, like festivals or marriages, precision was crucial. Astrology, a pseudoscience claiming divination by the positions of the planets, the sun and the moon, gave rise to one of India's oldest and most important sciences, astronomy. I'd heard and read about the Jantar Mantar, but nothing quite prepared me for this unique sight. The Jantar Mantar is one of 5 observatories built by Maharaja Jai Singh more than 300 years ago. What looks like a giant playground is in fact an architectural and astronomical marvel. Unlike the small metal tools the Europeans developed to read the stars, some of the 16 astronomical instruments built here out of stone, mortar and plaster are the biggest in the world. Prior to Jai Singh's time, astronomers relied on smaller instruments such as the astrolabe. The immense forms that Jai Singh built here and elsewhere in India are the only ones of their kind. Why is it that an instrument like this is so big? Resident astronomer Dr. S. Bhattacharya explained the importance of scale.
Circumference and the large number of markings you can have on the circumference and really small angles you can measure through.
And is that true of all of the instruments? They're all so big because that makes them all more accurate?
Yes, exactly. Measurements can be really accurate.
So the bigger it is, the greater the precision?
Yes, exactly. The larger there is the circumference, then the smaller angular measures you can mark on these dials.
At Jantar Mantar, the ancients could track the movement and position of the celestial bodies with a higher level of accuracy than anyone before them.
Believe it or not, the object behind me is a sundial. It's not one of those cute little circular ones you see. It is in fact the largest sundial in the world. This equinoctial sundial is called Samrat Yantra, which translates to supreme instrument. It is just under 75 feet high and Jai Singh's most important creation.
And these steps run 164 feet along the gnomon, the structure that creates the angle of the sundial. Jai Singh oriented the structure to the north. On an east-west line, he positioned the axis of a hemisphere to create two quadrants. Using geometry, he calculated the angle of the ramp at 27 degrees, equivalent to the latitude of Jaipur. So the ramp points exactly to the celestial North Pole. The shadow from the ramp falls onto the quadrant showing the local time, accurate to within seconds.
So can you tell me how accurate is this sundial?
Well, that's
Dr. S. Bhattacharya, the assistant director of the nearby Birla Planetarium, explained Samrat Yantra's accuracy.
Well, it measures, smallest measure of time is 2 seconds.
Each of these is 2 seconds?
Smallest ones are 2 seconds. But there are problems, of course, because sun is not a pinpoint source. The difference between the shadow and the light is not obvious.
Okay.
Your error can be more than 2 seconds.
But still, that's pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate. Every hour.
This ancient Indian innovation was used around the world for hundreds of years. Jai Singh's Samrat Yantra was astonishing in that equinoxes and solstices could be determined down to the second. Both of these celestial events are rather important to astronomical or astrological systems around the world.
But he didn't create something out of nothing. Jai Singh's designs capitalized on a dimension of science and technology with much older roots in India's history: mathematics.
It all started with a dream. According to Hindu tradition, the world began from nothing when it was dreamed by Brahma, the creator god of India. Brahma's waking and sleeping pattern was believed to govern vast cycles of history. So vast indeed that a single Brahma day lasted 1 kalpa, that is 4.32 billion years. Almost the same time span modern geologists estimate to be the age of planet Earth. Ancient Hindu chants and writings contain calculations of these Brahma cycles, outlining Indian mathematical works back to the 4th century BC. Interestingly, the ancients used words to express numbers. The word arms was used as the number 2, since humans have 2 arms. But words didn't lend themselves for calculations, so around 10 BC, they were replaced by symbols.
Prior to the Indians, the Babylonians had 2 symbols. This symbol signified 1, 60, and 3,600, and this symbol signified 10. Obviously, with only 2 symbols, the applications were limited. To write 6, it took 6 symbols. Even in the Roman system, it took 2 symbols. In the Indian system, however, it took only 1 symbol.
For more convenience and accuracy, the ancient Hindu language, Sanskrit, replaced word numbers with 9 single digits.
It is the Indian system of 9 digits that we use today.
Traders and merchants were looking for an easy way to count and calculate. So commerce became the motor for ancient Indian mathematics and a numeric system that invented this crucial digit.
It's the last symbol of this ingenious system for which we remain forever indebted to the ancient Indian thinkers. 0. For them, the symbol stood for the Sanskrit word shunya, meaning nothing. But once the concept became a symbol, mathematical computation was born. Just like Brahma's dream, from nothing came everything.
The impact of India's long history with the 0 can be felt across our high-tech world. No 0, no binary system, no computers. Without the concept of 0, modern mathematicians and physicists would all be out of a job.
All of this, the computers, the software, would be impossible without the preeminent ancient Indian invention, one that's been called the equal of any single human achievement, right up there with mastering fire or the invention of the wheel, the invention of the concept of 0.
Numbers have become so much a part of our daily lives that we forget where they came from. And if you ask most people about the origin of our numbers, they'll probably say they were Arabic, and that would be wrong.
It's not difficult to see how this mistake occurred. Arab traders introduced the 10-digit system to the West around 900 AD. But even in their own records, Arab scholars refer to the Indian system. In all likelihood, the Arabs picked up the Indian way of counting in a marketplace, much like this one.
It was a time when knowledge was bartered and traded like a commodity, when merchants from China or Arabia travelled to India for treasures found nowhere else, like spices, gems, and a special metal with far-reaching impact. In search of the first advanced material in the ancient world, I travelled north to the foot of the Himalaya mountains to find clues to the legendary Wootz steel. From the dawn of their civilization, the Indians wisely utilized what the land provided, devising methods to shape nature to meet their needs. India's history of metalworking is documented in some of the oldest written records in the world. It is legendary. Yet only a few tantalizing clues to the source of that legend remain. Here, along the road to the Himalayas, I'd heard there were groups of itinerant workers who still retained one of the main skills of the ancient Indian metalcraft. The Gadulia Lohars are blacksmiths whose smelting traditions reach back more than 3,000 years. Watching them hand-forge simple tools carried me back in time. I could easily imagine how the ancients smelted and forged their iron. Their methods seem to have changed very little. Iron ore from deposits across India was placed in a mud and brick furnace charged with charcoal. Bellows provided an air supply that brought the temperature up to 1100 degrees Celsius. The molten iron or bloom collected and cooled at the bottom. In order to make a tool or a weapon, the ancients reheated and hammered the bloom into shape, much like these lohars do with bars of scrap iron. After a few whacks with the hammer, I came to appreciate the blacksmith's skills. And what's more, I realised that while the ancestors of these lohars forged everyday tools that contributed to India's wealth, it wasn't sickles but swords that brought the world to India's shores. When in the 11th century AD, European crusaders felt the effect of Islamic swords in battle, their war stories launched the legend of the Damascus blade. One blow from the sword, they said, could cleave a European helmet without turning its edge, or slice just as easily through a floating silk scarf. Though the swords were forged in Damascus, the capital of modern Syria, the steel and the technology came from India. The Europeans took thousands of these fabled blades home, determined to uncover their secret. Yet, the formula remained a mystery for centuries. Besides smelting, I looked for another clue in my search for the fabled Wootz steel. To learn more, I travelled north to the foot of the Himalaya mountains. Following in the footsteps of ancient traders, for whom no distance was too far to get their hands on the fabled Wootz, I was in good company. Even Alexander the Great had sought this ancient Indian treasure. Today at Windlass Steel Company in the town of Dehradun, they're making replicas of the Damascus blade. Now, of course, they use modern tools, but the basic approach remains the same. Forging, shaping and polishing constitute the major steps in creating a blade. Still, the big question remains whether the modern replicas retain more than just the look of the legendary steel. One legend would have us believe that to give the sword its finishing touch, the metal was cooled by thrusting it through the body of a muscular slave, to have his strength flow into the sword. And that's not the only outrageous tale.
Others believe that the strength of Damascene steel came from quenching the sword in the urine of a red-headed boy, or in a goat that had eaten ferns for 3 days, neither of which got them very far. In the centuries after the Crusades, many sought to replicate the swords of Damascus, but most achieved only the appearance, not the properties. In fact, it took nearly till 1975 to unlock the secret of the Syrian sword, of Indian Wootz steel. The irony is, the most important legacy of the ancient Indian metalworkers was not the recipe of the steel, but a byproduct of the search for it.
Over the centuries, many metallurgists came to believe the blade's secret lay in its unique surface pattern called water structure. The pattern, some suggested, indicated that carbon content was the key. And while that was true, all attempts to reproduce Wootz steel failed.
And we have some latest equipments also.
In a modern lab where they develop new steel products, I met Mr. S.K. Mahajan, a sheet metal expert.
Okay, what changes with steel?
He's benefiting from the search for the secret to Wootz steel.
There are a lot of developments in the automobile sector, white goods sector.
Across Europe, researchers compared different metals under a microscope. They never found the secret to the magnificent metal, but what they did find was a lot of very useful information. So one byproduct of the search for Wootz steel was metallurgical microscopy. Discovered in 1822, it is still used today to evaluate the strength and purity of metals.
This is what happens inside?
This side, I'll show you the rolling mill.
To see another byproduct of the search for Wootz steel, I took Mr. Mahajan up on an offer to inspect a rolling mill. This is one of the largest sheet metal producers in India.
For centuries, metallurgists and blacksmiths tried mixing iron with everything from zinc to lead in an effort to replicate Wootz steel. Along the way, they took note of various new combinations and the interesting properties they had. In 1822, an English researcher by the name of Michael Faraday added chromium. He didn't get Wootz, but he did get a steel alloy which we could hardly live without.
Stainless steel evolved from Faraday's inspired research. What would we do without it? Using heat and pressure, the alloy steel sheets are processed to become appliances, automobiles, and other everyday tools and utensils. What makes stainless steel so desirable is that it doesn't rust, a property we easily take for granted. Today, steel alloys are the backbone of modern life, everywhere in the world. Owing a profound debt to the ancient Indians, we use them anywhere from airplanes to operating rooms. But besides Wootz steel, the ancient Indian metalworkers had more tricks up their sleeves. And to see some of their most monumental achievements, I travelled to the East Indian state of Orissa. Because it was here where in the 13th century AD, King Narasimhadeva commissioned a magnificent temple dedicated to the Hindu sun god Surya. Sun worship is one of the oldest forms of religion, not only in India. Konark Temple is the embodiment of Surya's daily ride across the sky. His chariot has 12 wheels, one for each month of the year. It's pulled by 7 horses, one for each day of the week. Konark Temple is one of India's most astounding sights. Though much of the original structure has decayed, I could see that the remains bear witness to the accomplishments of the ancient builders.
Researchers know a lot about how the temple was built because of the locals' deep attachment to it. The ancient Indian contractors kept detailed accounts of the construction on palm leaf manuscripts like this one. But some local families kept the original manuscripts, from which we have an astonishingly detailed record of the project, stretching back 1,000 years.
Organised with mathematical precision, the manuscripts tell of a highly technical building process which was completed in only 12 years. Stone blocks were the principal building material. Ironworkers played an important role in this ancient construction technique. They were the ones to forge these interlocking clamps, designed to hold the stone blocks firmly in place. What is new in this temple is that its builders relied on the innovative powers of the ancient metal workers.
Using the same basic technique of heating iron ingots and hammering them together, blacksmiths created beams up to 20 feet long and weighing over 5 tons. You can see here where the individual ingots were joined together. In so doing, the ancient blacksmiths created the first beams used in construction, a remarkable application of a simple technology.
Though there's evidence that other cultures used metal to join sections of stone, the ancient Indians were the first to incorporate long metal beams as structural components.
This is an impressive piece of engineering. Hand-forged iron girders support massive stone lintels to form the supporting structure of the building. During early explorations of the site, more than 20 girders were found throughout the temple. Now, given that each of these girders weighs around 10,000 pounds, and the stone lintel probably just as much, it's truly amazing that the workers could lift such a massive weight. The mystery was solved when researchers analysed the palm leaf manuscripts. It seems the builders relied on an imaginative mechanism created by the blacksmiths and a local source of auxiliary power.
Using hand-forged iron pulleys and ropes, the stone lintels were placed on wooden planks. Elephants were trained to step on these to raise the lintel pieces in the air, while a team of men pulled on the ropes to set them on the girders. Throughout the construction, elephants did the heavy work. From lifting to grading, they were not only the cranes but the bulldozers, levelling the building site before the foundation was laid. Their labour has made them immortal.
When you think how important elephant power was to the temple builders, statues like this one make a lot of sense. The elephants deserve to be remembered for their contribution to one of the great monuments of ancient engineering and architecture.
While temples like Konark rise to the skies as monuments to the innovative power and riches of ancient India, other extraordinary structures were built in the opposite direction. Underground water buildings like this one became the legacy of the ancient Indian craftsmen. They were the lifesavers in the ancients' never-ending struggle against flood and drought. The monsoon's powerful rhythms have shaped life in India since earliest times. Today, they continue to do so. 90% of India's rain falls during a 3-month downpour. The deluge saturates wetlands and swells the sacred rivers, which Hindus view as goddesses, brought to earth to help humanity. For those living in arid regions, the monsoon brings life. The need for water during the 9 dry months inspired the ancient Indians to develop a unique architecture. This is one of the most spectacular examples of ancient water harvesting structures. This step pond in northern India taps into a deep reservoir where it is believed sacred rivers mix. This stunning structure allows access to groundwater year-round. Its step architecture is one of India's most ingenious inventions, showcasing the expert skills of the ancient Indian stoneworkers.
This style of architecture, which is unique to India, is called a water building. This particular one, the Chandbauli Step Pond, is the largest of its kind. Step architecture, which could be round or rectangular, was designed to meet both practical and spiritual needs in India's driest regions.
Stone blocks became steps, facilitating the long walk down to the life-saving resource. And a long descent it was. The pond is over 5 stories down, and farther still when the water level drops during the dry months.
With stone blocks, you could build square corners and curves and keep the layers level, regardless of the incline. Whereas temple architects used stone blocks to build upwards, creating vaults and chambers. Step wells and ponds were built in the reverse direction. But first, they had to find the water.
A large tree was often the clue to the source. Near the tree, a rectangular well was dug to check the depth of the groundwater and confirm its purity. The well was widened into a rectangular pond, which was then lined with stone blocks. The step architecture kept the walls close together to reduce evaporation and ensure that the pond stayed cool. Allegedly, this was done with a special effect in mind.
Indians have a long tradition of water cooling methods. Evidence indicates that evaporation was put to a novel purpose centuries ago. European accounts of the 19th century tell of rows of shallow pottery vessels containing water, which were covered with straw and exposed to a draft. The evaporation chilled the water and could even produce small quantities of ice. Let's see if it works.
I waited only a few minutes, and while I didn't expect to see any ice, the thermometer told me it really works.
It's actually dropped by a few degrees. It seems like the ancients had an innovative way of making their lives a little more comfortable.
Dating back 1,000 years, water buildings like these show the advancement of ancient Indian science and technology. And what's more, the water harvesting techniques that sustained them for centuries are now inspiring modern applications. One project may just become a role model for others. Laparia is a small farming village some 2 hours' drive from Jaipur, in one of the driest regions of India. In a good year, the 3 monsoon months bring 12 to 35 inches of rain to Laparia, and that's usually enough to provide water for the people, their livestock and their crops all year round.
However, the monsoon is, well, the monsoon. In some years it brings 35 inches of rain, in other years only 5. With the population of the area increasing, water shortages become a serious problem. In 1982, a water management crisis inspired a local visionary. He tackled the problem using an ancient yet innovative approach.
हम सब लोग इकट्ठे होकर के और सब लोगों ने मिलके काम किया.
Laxman Singh, a member of a prominent local family, has dedicated his life to reviving traditional rainwater harvesting methods in a parched and barren land.
तालाब बने हैं, सारे लोग निठल्ले ना बने, कम से कम.
Mr. Singh explained that before he took up this cause, most modern approaches had failed because they were foreign to the villagers.
So मैं अपने गांव के प्रयासों में,
So instead, he reminded them of their ancient wisdom.
के प्रयासों में तब्दीली हो.
The water methods used in the construction of step ponds and step wells inspired the Laparia squares.
मेहनत करें चाहे नहीं करें, लेकिन
Based on an ancient technique, the starting point is a gentle slope in the landscape. A large patch of the slope is divided into rectangular units of approximately 200 by 400 feet. Each unit is enclosed by dikes along the three sides that lie towards the lower part of the gradient. They're called chaukas, meaning squares. This zigzag pattern on the land allows rainwater to enter the square and fill it up. Excess flows into the next square and then onto the next. Runoff flows into a storage pond or tank. Collected water percolates through a soil filter into the groundwater, which is pumped up through the village wells. As Mr. Singh explained the process in more detail, I realised that this low-tech, high-intelligence irrigation strategy manages a limited water supply most efficiently. In fact, Laxman Singh's approach was producing more drinking water as well as sufficient water for their pastures and farmlands. As it turned out, the ancient technology was very successful.
Two figures indicate the success here. In 1982, the village's largest pond, in local parlance the flower tank, irrigated 50 acres. Now it irrigates 700. That's a 14-fold increase based on what the ancients knew.
And what's more, the example set by La Paria can serve not only as a role model for India, but for other arid regions across the planet. Looking back in time, India's 5,000-year-old tradition with cotton has the subcontinent blooming and booming again. Nearly 200 years ago, it helped spark the Industrial Revolution. And today, this unrecognised contribution has India poised to regain its first place in the global textile market, providing the world with the fabric of our modern lifestyle. This is the Chandi Chowk Bazaar in Old Delhi. For thousands of years, traders came here to find something only India could offer. A fabric so versatile that when its virtues, soft, fine and airy, were revealed, the demand fueled an economic surge that changed the world.
I'm standing in a sea of a product that made India bloom and boom. Everything in this market is made of cotton. Deep within these colourful fibres is another untold story of India's contribution to our technological past.
Cotton was first domesticated 5,000 years ago in the Indus Valley, a part of ancient India that is today located in western Pakistan. Each fibrous bloom is called a bol, which contains many tiny seeds. Rich in vitamins and oil, ancient farmers fed the seeds to their livestock long before the true treasure of the plant was discovered. Called wool-bearing trees by the Greeks, cotton plants were traded across the ancient world, but few devised an efficient technology to mine their magic. Cotton seeds are extremely difficult to extract, especially when ginned by hand. But the ancient Indians had already invented a more efficient mechanical device millennia ago. The churka uses two rollers, a mechanism similar to an antique clothes wringer, which pinches the cotton balls, pulling the fibres from the seeds. Modern ginning machines borrow the principle from the ancient churka, which was the standard ginning tool for nearly 4,000 years. When in the 18th century the Europeans tried to mass-produce Indian quality cotton cheaply, something unforeseen happened. European inventors stimulated the Industrial Revolution, launching the age of machines. And although machines were able to replicate most of the legendary Indian process, one crucial manual step was never duplicated by a machine. Long ago, Indian craftsmen pioneered a tool that gave their cloth a unique quality. The origins of the spinning wheel are somewhat obscured, yet the earliest recorded appearance was in India. For millennia, thread was spun by hand and with simple spindles. Then, around 1,000 years ago, the spinning wheel was developed. It was a simple, yet enormously efficient technological leap. The wheel turns the spindle, which gently twists and collects the thread. The spinning wheel was so efficient that in skillful hands the normal daily output could be doubled, and yet the legendary quality was retained. Heavy industry may never be able to replicate the softness and quality of thread the spinning wheel produces. Indian fabric made in the traditional way is treasured today in much the same way it was revered by the ancient traders. Yet when spinning was industrialized, it changed the way we live. This mass-produced, easy-to-care-for material, which though not as soft as hand-spun fabric, could now be shared around the world. Today, cotton is the pivot point of a modern lifestyle.
Without cotton, none of us would have t-shirts or wear our favourite pants. Blue jeans!
You wouldn't think it, but 40% of our clothing contains cotton. With centuries of deeply rooted experience, India is once again poised to become the world's leading supplier of this ancient material.
Into the production area.
Thank
Please.
you. Thank you.
In this vast modern processing plant in Alwar, 2 hours drive southwest of Delhi, Prerna Syntex processes 800 tons of cotton per day. A far cry from what a farmer could produce with a churka. Here they spin some 10 million yards of thread a day, more than all the spinning wheels in India could have produced in a year. The technology that is likely to have originated in India hundreds of years ago is now re-imported from Germany, Japan and Switzerland by way of these modern machines, with the processes becoming ever more efficient.
We have made the cotton ready.
I came to realize how much ancient knowledge contributed to the importance of the marketplace, where not only goods but ideas have been bartered, exchanged and spread around the world. For thousands of years, merchants have come to buy, sell and trade here in the bazaars of India, returning home with Indian cotton goods, new ideas, perhaps ingots of raw wood steel, and of course the famed Indian spices so coveted around the world.
Many of these spices have medicinal properties. In ancient times, most medicines came from plants. According to the ancient Indian physiological texts, the state of one's health can be attributed to one's eating habits.
Science has shown that some plants have curative powers. Willow bark is the basic ingredient for aspirin. Spices like garlic are believed to boost the immune system and help with minor ailments. Drawing from these ancient prescriptions, herbal medicine has become big business not only in India, but worldwide. Native spices and herbs are mixed in a variety of combinations by more than 8,000 pharmacies. Global demand is difficult to calculate, but herbal products in India alone constitute a billion-dollar market. Herbal medicines are distributed in more than 20,000 dispensaries nationwide. But the use of herbs and spices is only one step towards health in India's comprehensive medical philosophy. Near the sacred Ganges River at the Kripalu Bagh Ashram, I found the ancient Indian healing practices still very much alive. This ashram houses an Ayurvedic clinic that treats hundreds of patients a day. Ayurveda in Sanskrit means the science of life, which defines health as total well-being. A medical diagnosis therefore does not only focus on the immediate symptom, but on the patient's relationship with food and herbs, the weather and the seasons, and even his or her personal relationships. Ayurveda was the first system of medicine to appear in the world. And finally, after 5,000 years, this holistic approach is now embraced in the West.
ये है आपकी हृदय मुद्रा.
Yoga, which is one of the most important aspects of Ayurveda, has become very popular.
I'm here to learn what I can about Indian medicine. Since it all began with yoga, yoga is where I begin. Let's see what they can teach me.
I joined the class at a crucial point. They were just getting ready for a breathing lesson.
और रोग प्रतिरोधक क्षमता को बढ़ाता.
Ancient yoga principles emphasize the importance of deep breathing and muscle control. Recent findings indicate that yoga boosts the cardiovascular system and relieves anxiety. It seemed to work. The yogic breathing exercise, though a bit unusual, invigorated me immediately.
Well, it may look simple, but I've just learned that breathing, which is one of the foundations of yoga, is a complicated business. I have a lot to learn.
हेपेटाइटिस बी को मैंने ठीक किया, इसे मैं मानता हूँ.
Yoga master Ramdev Ji took the time to tell me more. As a medical technique, yoga's goals are to restore the flow of vital energy around the body, to treat a variety of illnesses.
और इससे हमारे हार्ट के ब्लॉकेज से लेकर के कैंसर.
These old-school methods have recently had to withstand our Western benchmarks of science. Yogi Ramdev Ji thought a demonstration would best make the point. Postures and stretching appear to increase circulation to the limbs. Deep breathing induces relaxation, and with practice you can gain control of muscles you never knew you had. While yoga has reportedly helped patients suffering from afflictions like asthma and arthritis, the long lines of people at this clinic were clearly hoping that Ayurveda could do much more.
I couldn't think of a better way to learn about Ayurveda than to become a patient of an Ayurvedic doctor. So I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Gaval. Hello, can I come in?
Please.
I have a prescription letter.
Yes, please sit down.
Thank you. I would like a checkup.
Okay,
I'd like a
please.
general Ayurvedic
where?
checkup, please.
From where?
Australia.
Okay, I tell you what is Ayurveda.
Dr. Gaval explained that in Ayurveda it is all about your humours.
विज्ञान है.
Good health has to do with the balance of internal forces or doshas.
एक तरीका सिखाता है हमें.
But to begin with, Dr. Gaval started like any Western doctor would.
Chest, okay.
He listened to my heart and lungs.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, ठीक.
Okay.
Then he switched to Ayurveda.
First of all, I see your nails. It's good.
He examined the colour and texture of my fingernails and eyes, which could indicate a dosha imbalance.
Just like I have.
The pulse examination was the clincher.
My nose.
Since 13th century Vedic texts, pulse examination is one of the oldest forms of medical diagnosis.
Pitta and cough.
Each of the three internal forces or doshas pulses through the radial artery. Dr. Gaval's index finger read Vaya, which stands for air and ether. His middle finger picked up Pitta, that is fire and water, and Kapha, earth and water, registered on his ring finger.
Then your nadi is completely fit now.
Thank you. Okay.
ठीक है? You are totally fit.
Oh, I'm glad to hear.
Once he had pronounced that my doshas were in balance and that I was in good health, Dr. Gaval taught me some of Ayurveda's little-known accomplishments.
शरीर में सम है.
It was amazing to learn that hundreds of years before European medicine, Ayurvedic doctors had already developed a remarkable range of specialties. They included psychiatry, pediatrics, ophthalmology, toxicology, gynecology, and surprisingly, surgery. As it turns out, The ancient Indians had designed surgical instruments and developed unprecedented operating techniques centuries ago. Recently, one of their ancient techniques, which was once used to repair a punishment for adultery, has become rather popular.
Leaving a single line.
Throughout India's history, even medicine has taken its twists and turns. Tracking the legacy of the ancient Ayurvedic surgeons led me to one of Delhi's largest hospitals. I had arranged a meeting with Dr. Lokesh Kumar, a plastic surgeon. Familiar with Indian medical history, he assured me that one ancient Indian invention in particular was making a lot of people very happy today.
In ancient times, the standard punishment for adultery was removal of the nose. This gave ancient surgeons plenty of opportunities to practice rhinoplasty, or, as it's more commonly known today, a nose job. Now, Dr. Kumar, it's fair to say that Indian doctors have been doing what you do for a very long time.
Well, this operation of rhinoplasty, it evolved in India. The earliest description, that is 600 BC, was the tissue taken from the cheek.
Right.
But the basic principle remains same.
So what you're saying is that the practice you do today is exactly the same as the ancient practice?
That's right, because the reconstructive rhinoplasty has been practiced for ages. We mark
Except for a slightly different measuring technique, little has changed in the procedure invented by the ancient Indian surgeons.
For making the nose.
A leaf was used to measure the area to be covered. A flap of skin was dissected from the cheek or the forehead and flipped over. One side remained attached to provide the blood supply. The flap was then sutured to scarified areas on the cheek. Wooden tubes were inserted to form the nostril.
The essential technique of moving skin from one place to another is exactly the same as the ancient technique.
Well, that's right. Why we take the tissue from the forehead is because the skin here is quite elastic. And when we have taken sufficient skin from the forehead, we can actually mobilize the skin to close the defect.
So you can get a new nose and clean up the wrinkles on your forehead all at the same time?
Well, that's right. You get the forehead wrinkles removed as a bonus.
I wouldn't mind a bit of that. What most impressed me about my visit to Dr. Kumar's was the sheer antiquity of plastic surgery. For centuries, this ancient Indian idea has been a true blessing for those who desperately needed it, and for those who are merely looking for a little improvement.
As I left the clinic and looked into the faces of modern India, I could not help but think what a debt we owe to this ancient culture. From mathematics to architecture, what we wear to what we eat, our lives have been shaped by an ancient wisdom.
For 7,000 years, India has provided the world with its riches. India's contributions to science and technology may be obscured by time, but there is little doubt they provided the springboard for advances which shaped our world. Given India's track record, one thing seems certain: what the ancient Indians knew is worth rediscovering.